So instead of doing a police ride-along, what I actually did was go down to the Juvenile Department of Corrections in Northeast Portland, and I did some court observations for an afternoon. The first thing that struck me about the juvenile court is the amount of money that goes into the place, and I know that a lot of people, I think it's a pretty popular opinion, especially in places like Portland, that the government spends too much money on prisons, that, we have too much money going into that, prisons and military, when we don't have enough money for things like healthcare. But it was really interesting to me to look at the money directly put into the juvenile court system, especially because the JDC is located about 10 blocks from the Portland school where I did an internship 2 years ago. And that school in Northeast Portland, Marysville, is a Title I school and just comes with a lot of baggage, mostly related to money, about just not having resources, just not having what they need in that school. And so when I went down to the JDC this week, everything being beautiful brick and hand-carved wood pieces and everything done in wood paneling, and just from the moment I stepped in the building, I was just like, there's a lot of money going into the juvenile court system instead of going into the education of children. So I went up and found the courtrooms, and again, just a phenomenal waste of resources. When you walk into the wing with the courtrooms, there's 8 courtrooms, and I couldn't get into all of them, but I could at least look into all of them through the windows, and they're all very large. They're all larger than the largest classroom that I have ever worked in. And they're all covered in just beautiful, beautiful furniture and matching leather rolling chairs, about a dozen in each room for the lawyers and everyone to sit at, and then these beautiful solid wood, just the money, the expenditures on objects that are of no real purpose, objects that could be cheaper and serve the same purpose. So it was really hard to enter the courts, having already observed that, and already thinking that this is just a phenomenal waste. The other thing I noticed, 5 of the courtrooms were not in session that afternoon, so that also had me thinking about the waste of resources, in having more courtrooms than were necessary. Although I suppose, thinking about it now, I suppose that's a good thing, to have a bunch of empty courtrooms. So the first case I sat in on was the ending of a divorce case, and so I watched a lawyer and the mother were there, and then the lawyer for the father was there, and the father appeared by phone, and then there were 2 more lawyers for the 2 teenage children. And they were not, I thought at first when they came in and said that they were representing each of the children, when they identified themselves to the court reporter, I thought that they might be guardians appointed by the court for the children, but they were actually lawyers. They were actually addressed as counsel. So that means they were people who were hired to represent the legal rights of the children, not people that the court just assigned to help make good decisions for the children. So I watched that case, and they came to a resolution about parenting agreements and money and stuff, and when I walked out of there, I got to talking to one of the guards who sits in that hallway, and I kind of said how I was surprised that each of the children in the case had a lawyer, and I kind of asked if that was normal. And he said, well, we're not just here to put kids in jails, we're here to help kids with all aspects of their lives. And he got kind of poetic about the purpose of the JDC it made me feel a little bit better to actually have witnessed something that was preemptive, getting kids some protection and getting their legal rights covered in this divorce, instead of just, hoping that as their family and as their parents go through this huge, very angry, drawn out legal battle, just hoping that the kids make it through. Instead, they actually had representation from the start. So then I got to watch, I'm not sure what stage it was, I got to watch part of a hearing for a youth who had several years history of truancy. He had just not been in school, but he was only 15 now, and he had this, oh, he's been truant since he's been 11 kind of record going on. And the judge was trying to decide if he should take the child out of his home and trying to decide where he should send him. And it wasn't just that he wasn't going to school. He had several minor thefts over the last several years that he had been caught at, and several vandalism type charges that I took to be them more like graffiti rather than violent destruction or something. But it was hard to tell because this was clearly a case that I had missed, all of the context for, and I was clearly just listening to a hearing that was happening kind of in the middle of it. So the judge was trying to decide where to place this youth, whether he could stay in his parents' home, where the judge said clearly he wasn't getting any supervision or support, and whether he should go into foster care, or whether he should go into a residential treatment program. But he didn't mean drug treatment, he meant I don't know, some sort of corrective home setting. And the judge kept saying, I don't want you to end up locked up. I don't want you to end up locked up. I don't want that to happen to you. But I feel like that was kind of an empty threat, because there wasn't any specific charge against him. It was more like, oh, you've just done these 17 kind of bad things, so let's do something with you now. So that was, I don't know, I felt a little bit like this was a too little too late intervention. Why didn't someone intervene with this kid a couple of years ago? Why wasn't this handled in his school? Or why wasn't this handled in some way before he's 15 and in court and a judge is basically threatening him, where do you want to go, where do you want to end up? So then I watched 2 other cases through the afternoon, but now I'm looking at my time and I've gone really long. Another one was a divorce one where the mother was claiming abuse, not of her but of the child. And the child wasn't in court, but there was the person who's appointed to be the guardian for the child was there, and I took it to be that the child was just barely school age, because they were talking about the recent past and saying before the child started school, so I took the child to be maybe 5 or 6 or 7. So the mother was getting ready to do a big, custody sweep. And then there was another one that I went into that the judge only let me stay for a few minutes and asked me a couple times why I was there. And I just grasped that that was a juvenile adjudication, so that was an actual juvenile accused of an actual crime and facing maybe a sentence in a juvenile correction facility. And so when they were ready to really get started about that one, and when the counselors said they were ready to call their first witness, the counsel for the youth, for the defendant, asked the judge to clear the courtroom of spectators because of the sensitive nature and privacy of the victim and the defendant. So then the judge asked me to leave. So I guess I'm just back to... It's hard to only see snippets, it would be a lot more interesting if I could see one court case from beginning to end, but court cases don't go beginning to end in one day. They just never do. So mostly what I walked away with was just the impression of the money, just the money that goes into that building. And that makes me wonder, like, what kind of money goes into other buildings in the system, and what kind of money goes into, I mean, even, like, what does the juvenile detention facility look like? You know, is it that nice on the inside, or does it look more like the state prisons that I've toured before? So that it's just the money, just the system is still kind of hard to swallow, especially knowing that education is the number one way to keep kids out of the juvenile correction system. Just to know how much education struggles financially versus seeing things that I think are completely unnecessarily expensive, seeing them used around a court building.